Hello and welcome to another tier list video. Today we are taking a look at, that's right, meats. I mean, come on, who doesn't love meats? Well, besides maybe vegetarians and vegans out there. I suppose this video would not be the most relevant thing to you, but for all my fellow meat lovers out there, I think you might enjoy this one. I'm personally a pretty huge fan of meats, love to eat meat all the time. And pretty much all these pieces of meat on this list I eat rather frequently, but some of them I've only eaten once before, so take my opinion with a grain of salt as you will. But starting us off, we have bacon. I mean, come on, bacon. We're starting off this list a little too strong, honestly. Bacon is easily one of my favorite meats on this list. I mean, it's just the pinnacle of breakfast meats in my opinion. Bacon is just fantastic. I mean, unless it's like, you know, really underdone or really overdone, bacon it's gonna taste good. Bacon, absolutely phenomenal. Probably one of the most unhealthy, if not the most unhealthy meat on this list, but definitely gonna find itself up in the S tier nonetheless. Up next, we have beef. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of beef. It's a super versatile type of meat as well. I mean, you know, you can just use it in so many different ways. I mean, if you look at all these meats, I would say beef is probably the one that you're gonna see in the most amount of recipes. Besides maybe chicken, I think would come close, but beef is just so versatile, and honestly, it's delicious. But with that in mind, you do have to remember that beef can vary a lot from cut to cut. I mean, depending on, you know, how lean it is, you know, the type of beef it is. I mean, I've personally never had Kobe beef, but I mean, you know, that's really the top of the line. And then at the bottom of the line, you have, you know, like the discount grocery store beef that's like 50% beef, 50% other. And so beef, you got to be careful with your cut and your quality and your leanness. But honestly, it's just a fantastic one, super versatile. Also going to find itself up in the S tier. Up next, we have catfish. Now, honestly, the first time I had catfish, I was not really expecting to like it. I really like a lot of fish, but what people had told me about catfish is that it's a very fishy type of fish. I mean, come on, fishy type. All fish is fishy, but some fish is more fishy than others, I will admit. And so honestly, I wasn't really expecting to like catfish that much. But honestly, I had it and I thought it was pretty good, and I've had it a couple times since then. I had deep fried catfish one time, which of course, you know, you deep fry anything, it's gonna taste good. But the deep fried catfish was phenomenal. But I think catfish is really pretty good. I think for people who like fish, I'd recommend trying catfish if you haven't tried it. It's pretty cheap because, you know, catfish are so big and it's honestly not that popular. But yeah, you can get pretty good deals on catfish meat, and it really tastes decent. It's not my favorite type of meat, but honestly, as far as the meats go on this list, it's decent, and it finds itself in a, I would say, rather respectable B tier. Up next, we have chicken. I mean, come on, chicken and beef. These are the two pinnacles of meat in terms of, you know, the number of things you can do with them. I have chicken. I mean, I probably like beef more than I like chicken, but I definitely have chicken more frequently just because it's like so easy to cook. And you can buy it for, I would say, usually cheaper. I mean, chicken breast is like a dime a dozen, so chicken, honestly, another thing, integrates great into a ton of different dishes. You can cook it so many different ways. Chicken, unlike beef, is one that there's not as much variance in the quality of chicken. There definitely is, don't get me wrong, there certainly is, but it's not quite to the extent of beef. You know, you look at like the top of the line beef to the bottom of the line beef, I mean, there's a Grand Canyon between those two types of meat. Chicken, you look at the best chicken, you look at the worst chicken, it's still a canyon, but it's not nearly as big. Like, pretty bad chicken is still like pretty good, where pretty bad beef can sometimes be like unedible. Honestly, chicken, you know, as long as you're cooking it all the way, that's one thing you gotta be sure. I was served partially raw chicken at a restaurant once before, so I had that a bad experience, but I didn't eat it. I cut into my chicken and it was still like rubbery on the inside, so yeah, that was unfortunate. But with that in mind, you know, chicken is still fantastic. Love chicken. Gonna find itself up in the S tier. Up next, we have clams. Some seafood on this list, of course. Honestly, clams are something I've probably only had like 3 or 4 times in my life. It's never something that I go out of my way to order, but if I'm ever like, you know, on a cruise or something where, you know, it's an appetizer, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll take an order of clams. But not really something I really seek out that often. But when I've had clams, honestly, I've liked them. You know, it's, some people struggle with clams because it's like, you know, you see the literal clam there and you're kind of eating like the, I don't know, it almost looks like its tongue, but it kind of is its tongue. I'm not exactly sure, but the clam meat basically. And honestly, it's pretty good. I like clams. It's nothing that's gonna blow me away, but you know, if I'm on a cruise or if it's a place where it's, you know, there's clams and I don't have to pay extra to get, I'll go for the clams sometimes just because it's something I don't have that often. It's decent, not gonna blow me away, but pretty solid. Clams gonna find themselves up in the B tier. Up next we have cod. Honestly, a really great piece of fish. This is another one that's really not that popular. Probably because it's, I mean, I want to say it's similar to tilapia, but I don't think it's actually that similar to tilapia, which tilapia honestly should be on this list. I would probably put that up in the A tier for me. But cod, I think, is really good. For me, it's kind of a tilapia that just has a little bit more flavor on its own. Tilapia, I really need to season it in order to bring out the flavors. Cod, I still season it, but even if I ate it plain, it would still be pretty good. Honestly, just a great piece of fish. Gonna find itself up in the A tier. Up next, we have crab. Now, honestly, crab is one that when I first tried it, I wasn't really a huge fan of it, but the more I've had it, it's kind of grown on me more and more over the years. And honestly, at this point, crab cakes, I mean, I love crab cakes. Like, you get some crab meat in there, some bread, some cheese. It's fantastic. You're in for a good time if you have some crab cakes. But crab, honestly, it's solid. I like it, especially, you know, when they serve it with the butter and you dip the crab meat in the butter. Anything dipped in butter is gonna be good. So crab, honestly, another really solid seafood option, and it's gonna find itself up in the A tier for me. Up next, we have duck. Now, duck is something I've only had once in my life, and I'll be honest, I wasn't super impressed. I think I want to try it again, just to, you know, maybe season a different way or prepared a different way. But when I had it, it wasn't super good. People say everything tastes like chicken, and when I was given duck, they're like, oh, it tastes like chicken. Honestly, it doesn't taste like chicken. There's a lot of things on this list I'm going to be talking about that do not taste like chicken, that I was told would taste like chicken. It tastes different. Like, there's some similarities in terms of, like, texture maybe, but I would say duck is a little gamier than chicken, but honestly, was not super impressed with duck. I'd like to give it another chance, but it's not something you really see on, you know, menus very often, maybe at a really fancy restaurant, but, you know, I tried it on a cruise once, and I don't think it was, you know, the fanciest duck in the world, so duck, from my experience, gonna have to find itself in the C tier. Up next, we have escargot. In other words, snails. This is another one that I've only had once before. And honestly, I wasn't super impressed. It was okay. I had it. I had it on a cruise. It was like an appetizer. I was like, sure, I'll try escargot. You know, even if I don't like it, I got my main meal coming. Not too worried. But escargot, it's okay. Honestly, when I had it, it kind of reminded me of clams in terms of flavor, but they're much mushier and a lot saltier. Maybe it's because they were like, you know, sitting in like a literal pool of butter, but they were very salty, and honestly was not a huge fan of escargot. Don't think I'll probably order these again. I really don't think there's anything, I mean, they were already covered in butter. I don't think there's much more you can do to snails to make them taste better. I think it's something fancy that, I don't know, people like to say they eat to try and sound fancy, but don't bother. It's not great. It's not repulsive, so it won't be F tier, but it will be down in the D tier. Up next, we have frog. Now, frog is another one I've had before, and yeah, they told me it was going to taste like chicken, and I'll admit, it tasted a little bit more like chicken than duck did for me, but honestly, I was not impressed. I had frog legs, and they were pretty small. They were like 2 frog legs. I guess, you know, small compared to other pizza meat, but a fairly large frog leg. So this was no small tadpole. It's a big frog. And honestly, it was not seasoned very significantly, I should say. There's very, very little seasoning on there, and I like chicken. I do like chicken. But with chicken, even chicken, you gotta put a little something on there, right? Like, you can't just eat it plain. Like, you gotta put a little seasoning or a little sauce or mix it with something else. You know, raw chicken, it's good, but it's good to put something on there. And that was kind of where I felt with the frog legs. There was like so little seasoning, you could barely taste it. And the frog legs themselves did not have a whole lot of flavor. I will say again, they did not really taste like chicken, but they did have a very similar like texture and feel to chicken. Like if I had no taste buds and I was eating frog leg meat, I probably would have thought it was chicken because, you know, texture-wise it is similar, but flavor-wise it wasn't quite there for me. This is another one like duck. I'd like to give it another try, maybe prepared a little bit better, seasoned a little more. I mean, the frog legs in this picture honestly look much tastier than the ones I had. But yeah, frog legs gonna find themselves in the C tier. Again, I would try it again, but not my favorite one. Up next, we have goat. Now goat cheese I've had tons of times. Absolutely love goat cheese. Goat meats I've only had one time, and it was literally a bite because it wasn't my dish. It was goat meat that someone else had ordered at a restaurant. And honestly, I tried it. I thought it was pretty good. But again, I had like 2 bites of it. But I thought it was pretty good. It's something that I want to order. I want to try in the future. Yeah, goat meat. It's all right from my experience. I can't really say too much because of my limited experience, but it'll find itself in a C tier for now. Probably would be a B tier if I had tried it more. But again, I'm uncomfortable putting this one too high or too low just from my limited experience with that one. Up next, we got a classic, hot dogs. You know, what kind of meat is in a hot dog? Well, no one really knows. I think it's supposed to be like the scraps of all the other meats from the meat factory and like the leavings and the, you know, the hooves and stuff like that. But honestly, I like hot dogs. I really like beef hot dogs. If you just get like the fake hot dogs, I don't even know what they make them out of, honestly. But you get the real authentic beef hot dogs, and those are really good. Like the fake hot dogs I used to get at school growing up in elementary school. I mean, they were terrible. It was like literally eating a piece of rubber, just no flavor. Like literally, the only flavor you were getting was the ketchup in the bun, and then there was just this little like piece of rubber that you had to chew on to like, you know, add a little more stuff to fill your stomach with, because the bun and the ketchup alone wasn't enough. But I was just eating bun and ketchup essentially. There was no flavor in that hot dog. But then, you know, years later, I discovered 100% pure beef hot dogs, and let me tell you, those are fantastic. I mean, honestly, ideally, you put them on a grill or cook them on a fire, but those beef hot dogs, you can put them in the microwave and cook them, and they're still gonna turn out good. I mean, beef hot dogs, they're good. I mean, it's not the greatest quality of meat hot dogs are, but honestly, they're good, and I'm gonna put them up in the A tier, and there's nothing you guys can do about it. Up next, we have lamb. Lamb is another one I've had a handful of times, and honestly, never been super impressed with it any of the times. I don't know if it's just the way it's normally cooked, but it's a very, very tender, soft type of meat, and it was almost a little bit off-putting because it was like a little too soft for what I was kind of expecting. But once you kind of get past that, the flavor is decent. For me, it kind of reminded me of, you know, filling the same role as like beef. It's usually like the main meat of a dish. You know, it's got some juices, you know, the flavors can get absorbed into other things, but for me, it just kind of fills that same role as beef, but just not quite as effectively. It's not bad, it's decent, but for me, lamb gonna find itself in a pretty mediocre bottom of the B tier, I would say. Up next, we have lobster, and oh man, I'm gonna get some criticism for this one because I do not like lobster, and I'm honestly okay with that because lobster is probably the most expensive thing you could buy on this entire list. Maybe escargot, I'm not actually sure what that normally costs. But honestly, yeah, lobster, it tastes somewhat similar to crab in terms of like, maybe not flavor-wise, but like texture-wise, it's kind of similar. But honestly, lobster, I'm just not really a fan of, and I'm okay with that. It's not disgusting. I would eat it if I was, you know, dying of food, dying of starvation. But lobster, it's not my favorite, so it's gonna find itself down in the D tier. Not F tier, because it's not repulsive. I'm not gonna spit it out. I could eat it, but yeah, not gonna seek out lobster. Up next, we have octopus. Honestly, this is another one I've had several times, but only at like Chinese buffets where they have like the deep fried octopus rings, octopus tentacles, I guess. And yeah, so I've never had anything where it's like, you know, you can see like and I've never had something where it's like the big tentacles like this. Like the tentacles I was having were like pretty small, like I would say like this big, just like a circle. And you mean you could see the tentacles on them, but they were not like the size of this picture. So I'd like to try a larger octopus to see what it's like. But honestly, it's pretty good. I think they fry it so it tastes good no matter what, and they season it. But honestly, octopus, I think it's pretty good from the experiences I've had. Gonna find itself up in the B tier. Up next, we have oysters. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, sometimes I feel like I mix up oysters and clams. I'm not always sure which one is which, but I like both of them. And I like them for the same reasons, pretty much. They both taste good. And yeah, the only downside for some people is the creepiness of, you know, the oysters and the clam shells. But I like them, so we're gonna find themselves up in the B tier. Up next, we have pork. Honestly, another versatile type of meat, similar to beef and chicken. There's a lot of different things you can do with pork, such as pulled pork sandwiches. Probably one of my favorite ways to use pork. But honestly, pork, it's fantastic. For me, I kind of like the bacon part of the pig a little more than the pork part. But honestly, pork, very solid. Gonna find itself up in the S tier as well. Just a phenomenal one. Ham is another one that really should have made this list, I think, and that would probably only be in the B tier for me, though. Up next, we have quail, or I guess, some type of bird meat. I've only had quail once, and let me tell you, it did not look as good as it does in this picture. I mean, this looks like some really, really delicious quail. Like, that looks fantastic. The quail I had, I'll be honest, it was pretty flavorless, kind of gamey, a little overcooked and dry. So quail, from my one experience, was not great. I'd like to give it another shot, but for now, it was not great. And it's because I've only had it once, I'm not going to put it in the D tier. And it wasn't like awful. I think it was just prepared poorly, so I'll put it in a rather mediocre C tier. Up next, we have rabbit. Rabbit, another one that I had once before. And honestly, I thought it was okay. I actually had this, they were serving rabbits at the buffet line, one of the buffet lines on a cruise, and I just took like a small piece of rabbit, probably, I don't know, half the size of a dollar bill, so not a big piece of rabbit, but I had it, and honestly, I thought it was pretty good. I had some rice on my dish as well, and I had some rabbit and rice. I thought it was okay, not too bad. It's gonna find itself up in the B tier. Salmon. Oh, guys, let me tell you about salmon. It is my favorite fish, one of my favorite meats. Honestly, thinking about it, I think salmon is honestly my favorite meat on this list. Yeah, I'm gonna say it. It's my favorite meat on this list. I mean, salmon, there's just something about it when it's prepared well and seasoned well. And I love salmon and rice. You mix some salmon, get some Cajun seasoning on there, maybe squeeze a little lemon on it, get some white rice, mix it together. It's a recipe for success. Salmon, definitely gonna be in the S tier. Up next, we have sausage. Honestly, I think sausage is fantastic. Really, all kinds of sausage, and it's another one that's very versatile. I mean, you have like breakfast sausages, you got lunch sausages, you got sausage on pizza. There's just a lot of different applications of sausage, and really, what makes up the sausage is what it comes down to. Because you can have sausage that is made up of garbage meat or types of meat, and the sausage can be garbage. But I would say for the most part, you have a sausage, unless you're, at like a school lunch or something, it's usually going to be pretty good. Sausage, definitely going to find itself up in the A tier. Up next, we have scallops. Honestly, scallops are what escargot wishes it could be. Honestly, it's like similar size of meats. Usually, you like cook it straight in butter. But scallops, they just taste way better, honestly. Scallops are phenomenal. Definitely going to be up in the A tier for me. Another really solid seafood. Oops, not spam. I want scallops. There we go. Up next, we have shrimp. And, man, if you guys were hating me about my lobster opinion, a lot of you are going to hate me for my shrimp opinion as well. I used to like shrimp. I used to. I don't anymore, but I used to really like shrimp. And I think it kind of stopped in elementary school. They used to serve popcorn shrimp. And basically what it was shrimp. It wasn't real shrimp, it was like shrimp replacement, which honestly tasted pretty similar to actual shrimp though, now that I'm thinking about it, but not quite there. And then it was breaded. Maybe you had this at your schools growing up, I had it at mine, and they served it every week, and I loved it. I looked forward to popcorn shrimp every single week. I ate that nonstop for 5 years in elementary school. And honestly, I got sick of it. I stopped liking it, and then after that, when I had real actual shrimp, I realized, it kind of just reminds me of that garbage popcorn shrimp knockoff. So I don't like shrimp anymore. And honestly, I would say I probably like it less than lobster, but it's not quite going to find itself down in the F tier. I don't think anything on this list belongs in the F tier for me, but it will be down in the D tier. Up next, we have squid. I've only had squid a couple times, but for me, I'm sure it's very different, and some of you will probably go on to tell me the differences between these, but I struggled to really taste much of a difference between the fried squid that I had and the fried octopus. For me, it was like a fried ring of, I don't know, like rubbery stuff that tasted good, admittedly, but it was not super impressive. It was decent, and for me, it'll find itself in kind of a low B tier alongside octopus. Up next, we have tuna. Now I have had tuna where it's like the actual tuna meat like you see in the picture, and I think that's actually pretty good. A lot of people think of tuna and they just think of canned tuna, which honestly, I still really like canned tuna, and I think I'm probably in the minority in that aspect of, I think most people don't really like canned tuna because it is very fishy when it's canned. But tuna, when you just get a fillet of tuna, it's really not that fishy at all, and flavor-wise, it's really good. If you like other, white fish meats, such as like tilapia, cod, things like that, I think you'll probably like tuna, because for me, it's not a white meat, but it still tastes kind of similar to those, and I think tuna fillet is pretty good. I even like canned tuna, so tuna gonna find itself up in the A tier for me. Up next, we have turkey. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of turkey. It's good, but I'm okay with having it like once or twice a year. Like, you always have it at Thanksgiving, of course, and sometimes you have it at Christmas or maybe like another holiday. But honestly, turkey is one that I would probably be okay with living without. It's nice to have it once in a while, but turkey, it's a pretty dry type of meat. Even if you cook it properly, it still ends up a little bit dry, and you kind of need that gravy at Thanksgiving to moisturize the turkey, to give it some more, something else to not dry your mouth out so much. But it's really just okay. I'm not a diehard turkey fan. I'm not a diehard turkey critic either. It's just kind of middle of the road for me, and it's gonna find itself in kind of a bottom of the B tier for me. That was venison, not turkey. Turkey. Up next, we have venison. And honestly, I think venison is really pretty good. I've never really had a bad experience with venison. I don't always know exactly what they do to prepare it. I know they use different types of deer meat, at least when I've had it. But they also, sometimes they put cheese in there. Sometimes they put like jalapenos, some different kinds of spices. Honestly, every time I've been given venison by a family member, it's been a little bit different. But honestly, every single time it tastes good. Never been disappointed by venison. It's a great lunch meat to snack on. So gonna find itself up in a solid A tier. Last but not least, we have Spam. Honestly, Spam, I feel like it gets kind of a bad name because the can looks like, and it honestly is from the 40s. I think they came out with Spam in like World War II or something. And honestly, it gets kind of a bad rap because it's like a very cheap type of meat. It's not real meat per se all the way through. I think it's mostly made of real meat, but there definitely is some filler in there. But honestly, Spam, if you cook it properly and you use it properly, there's places where Spam can shine. And guys, a lot of you are going to criticize me for this, but Spam belongs up in the A tier. It's good, guys. Trust me. It's good. There's good ways to use Spam. My grandma has a recipe where she makes these Spam and cheese sandwiches. Basically, takes a can of Spam, dices up the meat, melts it in with cheese, and then puts it basically in between like a dinner roll, and then wraps the dinner roll in tin foil, and then cooks it in the oven for a little bit. So the bun gets just a little bit crispy, the cheese all melts, and the Spam, it gets cooked, and there's just something magic that happens in that oven. I don't know what it is, but when it comes out, those Spam and cheese sandwiches are delicious, and for that reason alone, Spam belongs in the A tier. Well, that's my list. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed.